Hey everyone, this is Beardo bringing you more of the modern age history of Batman. Yesterday we went over Batman 455 through 465, which is kind of the first big chunk of Alan Grant's run on the title, and he really did a good job of picking up on some of the story threads from year one and running with those, and he did a good job of kind of expanding out the supporting cast and really fleshing out those characters some. Now, for the second chunk of his run, sort of his final year, or a little more than a year, things kind of went quite a bit downhill. The big problem, and there's really only one major problem with the second chunk of his run, which is that it really isn't a run. You have a lot of guest artists and writers, you have a lot of sort of guest storylines and big DC events and crossovers and all those things that we've grown to kind of hate in our comics. Really are very much prevalent in this set of in the set of issues that I'm going to be showing you today. So, we're going to kick it off with Batman 466. This is kind of a one-off storyline where Batman and Robin go to Hero World, which is just kind of a World's Fair theme park kind of a thing. You can see he's sort of strapped to the bottom of a big rocket here, and basically this issue for me is kind of a little bit of an homage to Dick Sprang, where you have kind of the over-the-top props, the Batman, like the oversized pianos and things like that. I don't think you actually had an oversized piano in this, but again, just sort of the strange over-the-top props. After this one-off issue, we jump to issue 467, which is part 1 of 3 of Shadowbox, and we have our first guest writer on Batman during Alan Grant's run. This is Chuck Dixon's story, actually, illustrated by Tom Lyle, and this is pretty much a direct sequel to the Robin miniseries that came out just before these issues did. And so you have kind of the return of King Snake, and you kind of have a Robin-centric story with sort of gang war breaking out in Gotham City, and Batman and Robin just sort of trying to keep the city in one piece. And all of that wrapped up here in 469. Now, we do get Alan Grant back with the next issue. However, he's at war with the gods in this one. This is War of the Gods, looks like part 15, part of a big DC crossover event that was going on at the time. Not really something that I know a whole lot about, so this issue just doesn't mean a whole lot to me. Excuse me. Next up, we have Alan Grant kind of more back to his usual thing. This is another one-off story featuring Killer Croc, actually pretty much told from his perspective. Batman is very much the antagonist of this piece, and Killer Croc has kind of found a home with a lot of the underworld dwellers that live underneath Gotham City and like abandoned subways and things like that, and he's sort of trying to protect them from outside elements. Batman comes in, sort of sees Killer Croc as the villain and tries to stop him, but eventually they kind of have a meeting of the minds, and they have a little bit of a team up at the end, which is kind of fun. Now, for those of you guys who really know Killer Croc from the last decade, you really kind of know him in one of two ways. He's either sort of a scaly guy who's kind of a pimp or a drug lord or something like that, or you know him as a complete, alligator-looking monster with no humanity at all. He's quite a bit different here in the early 90s and late 80s. He's much more of a sort of a Frankenstein figure where, he is sympathetic and he is a monster, on the surface, but there is more going on underneath. But even with that, he's still a very dangerous, lethal individual. And you kind of get a sense of that in issue 471. Now with 472, we're going to jump into another crossover and another guest writer. In the bottom here it says it's written by Alan Grant. That's actually a typo. This is a Peter Milligan story, which crossed over with his run on Detective Comics. This is the Idiot Root part 1 of 4. Batman had parts 1 and 3. And when I talked about Dark Knight, Dark City a couple of videos ago, I talked about, no one writes Batman the way Peter Milligan wrote Batman. And sometimes it really worked well, and other times not so much. Dark Knight, Dark City is the epitome of working well. The Idiot Root is the epitome. Well, man, I can't say it. Anyway, the epitome of not working well. Oof. Moving on. Destroyer Part 1, yes, another crossover, this one with Detective Comics and Legends of the Dark Knight. Alan Grant back on story duties at least. This is sort of about kind of a demolitions villain who's blowing up buildings in Gotham. When I heard about Death by Design by Chip Kidd, I was kind of reminded of this Destroyer story, but I haven't read that one yet, so I'm not 100% sure. The thing that really makes this story memorable is they incorporate the illustrations of Anton Furst and his sort of set designs for Gotham City and the Tim Burton Batman movie into the comic, which is pretty cool, and that's kind of what the result is here on the cover. That's kind of what you're looking at. Kind of a fun one-off story, mostly interesting, again, for this sort of Anton Furst set design, which, whether you like the Tim Burton movies or not, you kind of have to admit, like, his set design is very spectacular. Alright, as soon as we're done with one crossover, we're into the next one. This is The Return of Scarface, part 1 of, I think, 3. Another tie-in with Detective Comics. This one, at least is a little bit more of an Alan Grant story, because obviously Alan Grant is famous for having created The Ventriloquist and Scarface, and he is on writing duties for this. So you kind of get a return to that. Basically, Scarface ends up holding, I think, Jim Gordon and several others hostage, and Batman kind of gets him out of it ultimately. This particular issue, for those of you who are Batman animated series fans, should hold a special place in your hearts, because this is the first appearance of Renee Montoya. Now, she did actually appear in comics before she showed up in the animated series, but she was created specifically for the animated series by, I would assume, Paul Dini, and DC Comics picked up on that and, you know, threw her into the books just a little bit ahead of the game, just to sort of create some cohesion. But this is technically her first appearance. And that all wrapped up here with 476. Now, the next issues that we're going to look at is another filler story, another guest writer, another guest artist, but this one I actually really enjoy, and out of all the ones that I'm reviewing today, this one's kind of the one I like the most. It's called A Gotham Tale. It's written by, I want to say his name's John Wagner, not 100% sure on that, and then illustrated by Cam Kennedy, and this two-parter actually has sort of a two-cover spread, sort of double wide cover here. I'll show these at the same time for you. And I don't know how well this is going to come out on the video here, but this is actually like a sculpted photograph of a sculpture that somebody did that makes up this actual cover. And the thing that I like about this story is it's got very claustrophobic. The whole thing basically takes place in a bank vault, I believe it was, and Batman and several other sort of hostages or trapped civilians are in this vault. One of them is not like the others. One of them is not who he seems. He's actually the Gargoyle, who you see here on the cover of 478. And it's sort of about these people together stuck in this situation and trying to figure out what's going on and get a handle on things. And then by the end of it, the Gargoyle comes to life and you kind of know what's going on and all the pieces kind of fall into place. It's kind of a fun, and then there were none kind of a story, although of course, by the end of it, Batman isn't the only one left alive. It's very much, but it still has very much that claustrophobic sense of people sort of stuck in this situation together and they just kind of have to all sit and reason it out. The other thing I really like about this story is Cam Kennedy's artwork. Ghost critics talked about like Ramos being fantastic for Spider-Man because he's a little bit cartoony, but it's a cartooniness that really fits with the character of Spider-Man. For me, Cam Kennedy is a bit cartoony for sure, but it's a sort of a very dark cartooniness, and it's a cartooniness that I feel really fits the Batman character very well, and I've always wondered why he didn't do more Batman stories, why they didn't use him more often. As far as I know, this is actually his only run on Batman proper. He may have done some runs on Detective Comics or something like that, but I'm not sure. He's sort of most famous probably nowadays for his stint on Star Wars Dark Empire, which is where I first became familiar with him, but he shows up here in the early 90s with A Gotham Tale. Good little two-issue story arc there. Alright, 2 more issues to go before we actually wrap up Alan Grant's run, which is kind of sad. Here's 479. This is another one-shot story with basically this assassin character. I can't remember her name. Don't know if she ever appeared again. Probably not. Not really a whole lot to say with that one. It's kind of important to note that during Alan Grant's run, even in the second half here, where, as I said, he's interrupted so much by crossover stories that pretty much all his issues are just one-shots, there's still an element of, him bringing in a strong female cast, with, having Vicky Vale present, you have Sarah Essen going on, you've got a strong interpretation of Catwoman, and he really has a strong variety of strong female characters in his run, and it's exemplified even here at the very end as it sort of limped to its finish with 479, and then the last issue being 480. And this last tale is basically just a Robin tale, kind of the typical setting up of what Tim Drake's life as Robin is like, and setting up the dynamic between him balancing his life with his father with his life as Batman's sidekick. So anyway, that wraps up the issues we're going to look at today and concludes Alan Grant's run on Batman. Next up, we will have the onslaught of Doug Moench to Batman, and what a run he had. He ran for easily 100 issues, but that's a story for another video. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.